Hi there, welcome back. In today's video, we'll be exploring Azure Vnet Peering and its benefits for your cloud network infrastructure. So this video is the first in a part of Azure networking. Before we start, let's look at quick introduction about Azure Vnet itself. So Azure Virtual Network, or you call Vnet, is the fundamental building block for your private network in Azure. A virtual network enables many types of Azure resources such as Azure virtual machines to securely communicate with each other, to the internet, and to your on-premises networks. So virtual network is similar to a traditional network that you would operate in your own data center, but brings with it some additional benefits of Azure infrastructure, such as scale, availability, and isolation. Let's look at the concept of virtual network peering. Virtual network peering enables you to seamlessly connect two or more virtual networks in Azure. The virtual network appears as one for connectivity purposes. The traffic in the peered virtual network uses the Microsoft backbone infrastructure. Azure supports following types of peering. One, the virtual network peering, so the connecting virtual networks within the same Azure region, and the global virtual network peering, which is like connecting your virtual networks across the Azure regions. So the network traffic between the peered virtual networks is private. So the traffic between the virtual networks is kept on the Microsoft backbone network. So no public internet gateways or encryption is required in the communication between the virtual networks. Let's look at some of the scenarios, to name a few, where VNet peering is useful. Multi-tier applications. So let's imagine when you have a multi-tier application such as web application with the front end, application logic tier, and database tier. So you can use VNet peering to connect these different tiers and separate VNets securely. And dev, test, and production environments. You could probably have different environments to deal with. You can create separate VNets for development, testing, and production environments. So VNet peering allows developers and testers to access resources in production VNet while keeping the networks isolated. Regional redundancy. For achieving high availability and regional redundancy, you can deploy the same application in different regions. VNet peering can help to connect these VNets in different regions for data replication and failover as well. Partner collaboration. So if you're collaborating with external partners or vendors who need specific access to your resources in your VNet, you can set up a peering connection to their VNet for controlled access. Before we get into the demo, let's look at some of the advantages of virtual network peering. A low latency, high bandwidth connection between the resources in a different virtual networks, and the ability for the resources in one virtual network to communicate with resources in a different virtual network, and the ability to transfer data between virtual networks across the subscriptions and tenants and deployment models and regions. And there is no downtime to any of the resources in either virtual network when creating the VNet peering or once the peering is created. Okay, let's look at how virtual network peering simplifies the network architecture in Azure. So no need for a gateway. So when you wanted to connect virtual networks, you often have to use gateways, virtual network gateways, which requires additional configuration, cost, and complexity. So with VNet peering in place, there is no need for such gateways, making the setup simpler and simplified. Low latency communication. VNet peering allows for direct and low latency communication between the virtual networks within the same Azure region or between the regions as well. Network isolation. So each VNet can have its own security and network policies, so which are not affected by the peering. So the isolation allows for better segmentation of resources while still enabling communication when necessary. Easier scaling. So as your Azure architecture grows, you can easily add new virtual networks and establish peering relationships, so without the need for extra configuration or re-architecting your entire network. This scalability simplifies network management as your infrastructure expands. And note that we'll be looking at demo creating virtual networks within the same region, West US. We'll not be looking at the global VNet peering configuration in this demo. We probably will make another video later on, but in this demo we'll be focusing on virtual network peering configuration within the same Azure region, which is West US. So moving on to Azure portal, let me move on to virtual networks. So I've created a couple of virtual networks already, which is in place. So the first virtual network, myvnet1, has the address space 10.0.0.0/16, and you can see the address space and the address count. And looking at the subnets, we have the default subnet with the CIDR notation /24, which has 249 available IPs. And let's look at myvnet2 address range as well. So we have the address space for myvnet2 10.1.0.0/16, and let me move on to subnets to look at the default subnet in place, which is in /24. Okay, let's look at the couple of virtual machines we have created in the same Azure region as we have the virtual network, myvnet1 and myvnet2. So let me look at the myVM1, and as you can see, we have this VM under the virtual network myvnet1 in the default subnet. And you can also go to networking under settings, and as you can see here, we have the network interface, the private IP allocated for this VM1, which is 10.0.0.5 under myVnet default subnet, VNet1 default subnet, and the default port rules are there already. So similarly, let's look at myVM2, which is under myVnet2 in default subnet, and you can see the private IP allocated for this myVM2 as well, which is 10.1.0.5. Okay, so now we have a couple of virtual machines inside the myVnet1 and myVnet2. Now going back to virtual networks and probably myVnet1, under settings, click on peerings. As you can see, I have peering already in place and the peering status is connected. So let's look at the peering configuration that we have to go through. I've just named it as VNet1 VNet2 peering. So yeah, I think as you can see, the peering name, peering status, it is fully synchronized. Peering status succeeded. There are some options here. So we are saying allow the connection from myVNet1 to access myVNet2. So the peering configuration is quite simple. Once you have the virtual networks in place, it's just a matter of minutes. You have to set up the peering configuration between the two virtual networks, and then you're done. So we'll not be looking at the gateway transit. So to allow the gateway in the myVNet1 to forward any traffic to VNet2. So that we will look at some other time. But when it comes to the configuration, it is quite simple, and then yeah, you have to get the two virtual networks connected. Okay, now we have the peering configuration in place. So what we will try to do is we will try and ping the myVM2 from within myVM1 and see if we are able to establish the connection. So we have this public IP address 20.245.75.17 in place in myVM1 to try and see if we are able to establish connection to myVM2. So what I'm going to do is we will try and establish the connection. So we will use the Azure CLI secure shell, and when I have selected this, so we are just making sure the port 22 inbound access is in place. So let's give a moment to get this configuration done. So it's trying to create a system assigned managed identity for authentication purposes. It is trying to install Azure AD SSH login extension, and there you go. Once all of those prerequisites are configured and checks are complete, it will bring up the Cloud Shell for you. There you go. In the Cloud Shell, as you can see, we are inside the virtual machine 1. We did easy SSH VM resource group tutorials, and the VM name is myVM1 and subscription ID. Then as you can see, connection has been established to VM1 for us to be able to see if you're able to ping the VM2 from within VM1. So as you can see here, yeah, we did a ping to the private IP address of VM2. So let me show you that. For my VM2, what is our private IP in virtual network 2? In the default subnet is 10.1.0.5. So that's exactly I tried to do here. So we are just trying to ping 10.1.0.5, and there you go. You can see there is a ping response with bytes of data, and there is no packet loss. So we are able to successfully test the connectivity between the myVM1 and myVM2, which are in two different virtual networks, myVNet1 and myVNet2, in the demo that we just looked at. So once the peering connection configuration is established, so we were able to successfully ping the myVM2 from within myVM1. So probably one more test we can quickly do. Let me open the other window. Let me get into myVNet1, and let's try and delete the peering connection and see if you're able to ping the myVM2 from within myVM1. Let's do that quickly. So let's go to peerings under settings, and there we have the connection between myVNet1 and myVNet2. What I'm going to do is let me try and delete the peering connection between these two virtual networks. Now we have the peering connection deleted. So let's go back and try and see if we are able to. So we are already in the VM1 myVM1 machine. Let's try and see if we are able to ping the myVM2, which has the private IP 10.1.0.5. So there you go. I think we tried to ping myVM2 private IP from within the myVM1, and we couldn't receive any packets back. The ping it's 100% packet loss. Let's briefly look at security considerations in virtual network. So you can use NSGs to filter any inbound and outbound network traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network. Network security groups contain security rules that filter network traffic by IP address, port, and protocol. When a network security group is associated with the subnet itself, security rules are applied to resources deployed in that subnet. The next part of this video series, we will cover a detailed walkthrough and demo of NSG to filter any inbound and outbound network traffic. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing to get notified. Let's look at some of the best practices. As you build your network in Azure, it is very important for you to keep in mind the following design principles. So ensure non-overlapping address spaces. So make sure your VNet address space, the CIDR block, does not overlap with your organization's other network ranges. If you need to know more about CIDR notation itself, you can watch my other video where I explain CIDR in detail. And your subnet should not cover the entire address space of the VNet. So plan ahead and reserve some address space for the future itself. And it is also recommended by Microsoft you have few large VNets rather than multiple small VNets. This will actually prevent any management overhead. And secure your VNets by assigning network security groups. We just briefly covered that to the subnets beneath them. For more information about network security concepts, I'll produce a detailed video in this part of networking series. Okay, let's look at the summary of what we have covered in this video. So we looked at the virtual network introduction and the VNet peering concepts. And we also looked at some of the scenarios where VNet peering is useful. We also looked at the advantages of VNet peering. We looked at a quick demo. We did a quick demo there by creating a couple of virtual networks and virtual machines under the virtual networks. And then we tried to configure the VNet peering, and we tried to establish the connection, and then we ping the virtual machine 2 from within VM1, and we covered those. And we also looked at some of the security consideration in brief, but we will be covering in detail in the next video. And we looked at some of the best practices, the design principles when you set up the virtual network and peering connection between those virtual network. So I hope you find this video helpful in your Azure cloud learning journey. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions related to networking concepts that we spoke about in this video. And I encourage you to like, share, and subscribe for more Azure related content in the future. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.